Let's join him live now. He's our acting political editor. Mzwandile, thanks very much for joining us. Just as you ended that piece, you said that this is an unusual gathering because for the first time, America seems to be on another side to its partners. What are the contentious issues? I guess Paris Climate Accord, key among them.
Indeed, Peter, and I may as well add, I said observers will watch keenly what the final text will be saying. So basically we're saying that because the US president has made it clear, he didn't hide it from anyone, that, he is here with other world leaders, but to him, America is first. So that America first translates into many things for him. You know that a few weeks ago, Peter, he pulled out of the climate accord, the Paris Accord. So that actually gave other world leaders a very tough time, because here is the most powerful country in the world, which is supposed to take the lead, but it decides, no, I'm not going to be part of you. So we hear that from the text that is being drafted, the world leaders tried to persuade Donald Trump to say he needs to review the position. But of course, they did acknowledge that, yes, they understand where it's coming from, but for the sake of our future, he may have to review that position. So it's quite interesting, Peter. And then, of course, there was another range of issues that were discussed that relates to trade.
All right, so let's talk about the Trump-Putin meeting, which was also anticipated. Many people wanted to see what the body language was going to be like. How did that go?
Well, you would think, Peter, this was a meeting about Trump and Putin, given the kind of anxiety and the kind of interest that everyone had in this story, because it was going to be for the first time that Russia and America are meeting. And it seemed very cordial, because people were watching what kind of body language will Trump or even Putin exhibit, but it appeared very cordial. We understand that they talked about a range of issues, from the issue of Ukraine to the issue of North Korea. But they wouldn't give out much details except to say, well, these are ongoing engagements that world leaders do time and again. Given more time, they would be able to engage further into these kind of discussions, because at the end of the day, these are perhaps militarily most powerful countries in the world, so they can't afford not to talk to each other, because if these ones are on opposite ends, you definitely don't want a third world war.
All right, so South Africa is the only African nation attending, and I suppose in many ways carrying the African flag. But we do go there with our own interests as well as that of the continent. Finance Minister, everywhere he goes, he's continually having to try and convince the world that all is well back home.
Indeed, Peter, you have said it well. South Africa is the only member of the G20, but I can tell you that there are other African countries that were invited. Senegal, for example, Senegal is the chairperson of NEPAD, so it was invited, it's here. And then Guinea, the chairperson of the African Union, that country too is here. So as much as South Africa is the only member from the African continent, but they do invite other countries. And then Chancellor Merkel was saying earlier that she has the interests of Africa at heart. She was even going as far as saying, as Europe, they regard Africa as a neighbor, because this is the continent that is closest to Europe. So what Minister Gigaba has been saying, and when we have been interacting with him, he's been saying he understands that some people perhaps are not sure about what South Africa wants or is going, but he is here to assure them that South Africa is back on track, especially now that there is an issue of a world economy that seems to be recovering. So it wants to take full advantage of that. And then if South Africa takes full advantage of that, it means the African continent will benefit, because they've made it clear over and over again to say South Africa is the gateway to the continent, because it's in terms of institutions is very stable. In terms of infrastructure, there is proper infrastructure. So whoever wants to come and invest on the African continent, he can use South Africa as a gateway from where he can launch. So that's the message, Peter, that Minister Gigaba has been telling to his colleagues here. And he's been at pains to express that he will make everything in his power to make sure that investors really get their money's worth when they come to South Africa. So whether that will succeed, it's anybody's guess.
All right, and perhaps as a final question, a G20 summit would not be a G20 summit without protests. And I just wonder if you've been able to monitor what's been going on outside and beyond your buildings there in the welcome to held protests that have been unfolding.
Peter, the security here is at a heightened situation because of the very protests you are talking about. I think people here have made it clear to say they don't want this summit to come here, because, you know, those activists are very passionate about their cause. They're saying this summit happen over and over again, but at the end of the day, they don't yield any results. So that is why. So they've been really fighting with police. I'm sure you've seen some of the visuals. They were burning cars. They were picking battles with the police. But they've been able to control them. So they haven't gone as far as the summit. Because when we gathered from ordinary people and those who were supporting the protests, even though they were not part of them, they were saying they wanted the message to be loud and clear. They wanted to get as close as possible to where the summit is. But I can tell you, Peter, the way security is so strict, they were not able to do that. That's why perhaps you saw on television those running battles, and then they were frustrated, some of them. They just went to the patrol cars and bombed them. So yeah, protests in these kinds of events are now automatic. It's you know, every time you hold a G20 or a G8 or any gathering of this nature, the protests will be there. I mean, I can just remind you about the Seattle protest, which is regarded as one of the biggest protests. So it happens every time. It happens everywhere. It's not ending today. It's going to happen in the next summit. I can guarantee you that.
All right, and that's where we're going to leave it. Mzwandile Mbeje. Dankeschön. That's our political editor, Mzwandile Mbeje, reporting live from Hamburg in Germany, giving us an overview of some of the developments taking place there.